At 10:30 tonight, we present the horror movie, Part 1 of Frankenstein, The True Story. James Mason and David McCallum star in this adaptation of Mary Shelley's classic spine chiller. First, though, Sandy Gall and Carol Barnes bring you all the latest national and international news from ITN in London. It's 10 o'clock.
Belgian prisoners riot again over English soccer hooligans. Angry parents say Mr. Baker's refusal to act is disgraceful. One South African is swapped for 130 Angolans. Cole tells his visitor, pull down the Berlin Wall. And Britain's gold medalist in Rome says random drug testing is enough. Good evening. Dozens of people have been injured tonight as prisoners in another Belgian jail rioted over conditions for the Liverpool soccer fans who will be extradited on Wednesday. 13 inmates have escaped, according to Belgian television, and 7 warders are reported to have been taken hostage. The prisoners say the British fans will enjoy better facilities than they have. Today, the Belgian government denied that. Tonight's disturbance is at Saint-Gilles prison, south of Brussels, where 500 prisoners set fire to a whole wing. It's close to Forest Prison, the scene of last night's riots. The British fans will be housed at Louvain, 15 miles to the east, which is more modern than the other two. Tonight, Sir Harry Livermore, the lawyer representing 11 of the Liverpool fans, said he was horrified. He said, God only knows what will happen to them when they get there. We'll have a report on that later.
A decision by the Education Secretary, Mr. Kenneth Baker, not to intervene in the Dewsbury schools row has outraged parents tonight. They wanted him to allow their children to switch to a mainly white school from one which is predominantly Asian. But after meeting officials, Mr. Baker said there were no grounds for thinking the local education authority had acted unreasonably. The authority welcomed his decision, but the parents said they'd continue their protests tomorrow.
Once more, parents walked to Overthorpe School intent on leaving their children in an empty classroom. And once more, Headmaster Gordon Hurst barred their way.
There is no way that I can permit your children to come into school without authority from Kirklees.
Again, Mr. Hurst told the parents the matter was now in the hands of the Education Secretary Kenneth Baker in London. Half an hour later, the parents decided to take their children home, warning that if Mr. Baker didn't lend his support today, then they'd be back again tomorrow. At a meeting tonight, the parents got the news that Mr. Baker had decided not to intervene in the row. He'd said the Education Authority had not acted unreasonably.
Absolute disappointment all the way around. And all I can say now is we're going to up the campaign, and we are going to win, whether he likes it or not, because the council are, as that gentleman said, they're a sham, they're liars, they've lied to us right from February.
The parents said they plan to take their case to the European Court of Human Rights. Tonight, the chairman of Kirklees Education Committee said he was relieved at Mr. Baker's decision.
But if they're still determined not to go to Hatfield School, we are offering to look at other alternatives, but we cannot offer them places at the 2 Thornhill schools that they're insisting on going to.
There is no way that these parents will get to send their children to Overthorpe?
Not at all, no, unless the Education Committee meets again and changes its mind.
The parents now have the government, the local authority, and effectively the law against them. But they say they're determined to continue their fight, and that tomorrow they'll be back at Overthorpe School once more, and that this time their children will get in. David Glencorse, News at 10, West Yorkshire.
We're going over now to Paul Davies in Brussels, who has a report on the riots in Saint-Gilles prison.
For the second successive night, a cloud of smoke hangs over a Brussels prison as hundreds of inmates battle for control with their warders and riot police. The riot began early this evening. Units of paramilitary police who'd been on standby called in when 500 inmates refused to return to their cells after an exercise session. For hours, the rioters battled with police along the corridors and catwalks of the maximum security Saint-Gilles prison. While fighting continued, firemen tried to tackle the dozens of blazes started in individual cells. Riot police attempted to seal off the area, but a number of prisoners managed to escape during the confusion. Once again, the cause of the discontent was the Belgian prisoners' anger at what they describe as luxury hotel accommodation being provided for British football hooligans. But tonight's riot was a far more serious incident than the disturbance at nearby Vorst prison yesterday evening. It soon became evident that both inmates and prison staff had suffered many casualties, some so badly injured, impossible to tell which side of the battle they'd been on. This is what the prisoners were so upset about. TV pictures of the remand wing at Leuven jail, which have been prepared for the 26 Britons. Pictures of the recreation rooms and colour television sets have been widely shown on Belgian television. Tonight, the senior fire chief at the St. Gilles riot confirmed the reason for the uprising.
They said things about the hooligans.
What did they say?
Hooligans in the hotel and things like that.
As the police regained control, prisoners who'd attempted to escape and some evacuated from burning cell blocks were led back to the jail. Earlier today, the Belgian Ministry of Justice issued a statement promising its prisoners that the Liverpool supporters would not be given privileged treatment when they arrive here. By their actions tonight, the prisoners have shown exactly what they think of that statement. The authorities concerned now what their prisoners will do when the Liverpool fans actually arrive here. Paul Davis, News at 10 in Brussels.
Here, police have set up an anti-terrorist hotline in Blackpool to help them track down a suspected IRA hit squad before the Conservative Party conference. They've appealed to anyone with information to phone their confidential line. The special number is 0253 293324. In Wiltshire, 2 men and a woman appeared at a special court today charged with conspiracy to murder the Northern Ireland Secretary, Mr. Tom King. They were all remanded in custody for 14 days. It's not known if they're members of the IRA.
Chippenham Police Station was guarded closely for this hearing. Task force officers carried their weapons inside. A sniffer dog checked for any traces of explosives around the building. There were similar precautions on the roof and in the air as the cell block was emptied and officers led Finbar Cullen, Martina Shanahan and John McCann to the police canteen. All were brought into the makeshift courtroom handcuffed to police officers. The 2 men dressed in blue tracksuits, the woman dressed in a sweater and jeans. The clerk then read out the charge: conspiracy to murder the Northern Ireland Secretary, Tom King, between the 1st of July and the 31st of August. The 3 who gave addresses in Dublin and other parts of Ireland said nothing during the 20-minute hearing. The woman magistrate remanded them in custody to appear at the same court in 2 weeks' time. An armed convoy then left the station. In the first vehicle, McCann and Cullen. In the second, Shanahan. In Dublin, meanwhile, at the Shanahan family home, her father had this to say.
As far as I'm concerned, she notified me some weeks ago that she was going off to work and possibly to the continent.
Outside the city at the Maynooth home of Finbar Cullen this evening, his mother, a university lecturer, would say nothing about the charge against her son. There was a similar reaction at the middle-class Sandymount home of 24-year-old John McCann. His father, employed by an oil company, declined to comment. Tonight at the Phoenix Park Garda headquarters, close communication with the English police forces continues amidst the current heightened security alert in Britain. Michael Macmillan, News at 10, Dublin.
South Africa has won the release of one of its top commandos after swapping him for 135 other prisoners in a deal that involved 4 different countries. Major Willem du Toit had been held captive in Angola for 2 years. Released in return are a Dutchman who'd been hiding in his country's embassy in Pretoria, a Frenchman jailed in the black homeland of Ciskei, and 133 Angolan soldiers captured by UNITA rebels. All the prisoners were flown to Maputo in Mozambique, where the swap was overseen by diplomats from all the countries involved.
On primetime television tonight, live crossings to Cape Town for latest news of the swap. A reporter at the state president's residence waiting for released prisoner Wynand du Toit to arrive and be met in front of the cameras by P.W. Botha. The focus of attention is an officer in South Africa's Reconnaissance Commando, a unit similar to the SAS. Major du Toit was captured by Angolan troops while conducting a sabotage operation in Cabinda province in 1985. Also expected in Cape Town tonight, the bodies of 3 fellow South Africans killed in the same abortive operation. The price in the exchange, 133 Angolan prisoners of war like these, who'd been held at a base belonging to the UNITA guerrilla movement, which has been fighting a bitter civil war against the Luanda government, allegedly with South African support.
And this morning in the black homeland of the Ciskei, designated independent by South Africa, French national Pierre-André Albertini leaves the prison where he was serving a 4-year sentence for refusing to give evidence in a treason trial. His destination, Maputo, and then France and freedom. In Pretoria, a final gesture of defiance from political dissident Klaas de Jonge, while crowds of onlookers waited for him to emerge from the Dutch embassy building where he sought refuge from security police over 2 years ago. But a last glimpse was denied as to cheers from black bystanders. He too began his trip to Maputo and then Holland. The actual swap at Maputo airport was delayed, but late tonight the first pictures of Major du Toit walking with Foreign Minister Pik Botha on his way back to Cape Town, and a hero's welcome. Mike Hanna, News at 10, South Africa.
The British runner Steve Cram has criticised the American athlete Carl Lewis for claiming that gold medalists had been using drugs for the World Championships in Rome. Cram, back from Rome tonight, said Lewis should name names or shut up. Earlier, the International Athletics Authorities named 9 athletes who were suspended for taking drugs before the Rome Games.
The 9 guilty athletes were named by the authorities in Rome today. All were barred from competing in the World Championships, and 7 of them, including the Australian javelin thrower Sue Howland, have now been banned for 2 years under guidelines introduced last month. The athletes were exposed here, the leading sports drug testing centre at King's College, London. But like Carl Lewis, experts here are convinced the problem is far greater than the authorities acknowledge. More than just the handful of athletes they penalised today are guilty, they say. The problem is detection. The use of masking and diluting agents is rife, and they say tests at competitions aren't enough. They should be able to test anyone at any time.
We've got to be able to test more competitors out of competition rather than only at competition. We've got to be able to do selective testing. We've got to be able to test the people that have made a dramatic increase in performance or a very marked change in physique.
Many of Britain's athletes returned from Rome tonight. Britain is reckoned to be one of the cleaner nations when it comes to drugs in sport, but they too have been affected by the accusations. Tonight, some of our top-class performers had their say about Carl Lewis's allegations.
I think the best way to answer that is we as a nation have random doping control, and we hope that we can clean the sport up as best as possible.
Presumably you have to go undergo tests as well, do you?
Yes, I'm proud to say that I'm one of the athletes that have been tested random before and after competition, sir.
When you're out in a big competition like that, as long as you know you're clean yourself, then you don't really... I really didn't have any time to think about Carl Lewis's statement.
There weren't all that many extraordinary performances. If that was the case, then maybe I'm on some drug which makes me run slower. I don't know what it is.
Mark Austin, News at 10, Central London.
Here, the Trades Union Congress has opened in Blackpool with the leadership getting its way over the debate on no-strike deals. Mr Arthur Scargill was heavily defeated in his attempt to get an immediate vote on expelling unions which sign no-strike agreements. Instead, the vote was for a review body which will report back next year. Mr Scargill called it a typical TUC fudge.
Mr Scargill's virtually solo campaign to ban no-strike deals now came to grief. He'd been a lone voice on the General Council. Congress voted to defer the decision. But hostility to the controversial agreements was widespread, the left arguing that what right-wing newspapers backed must be bad.
And if any of the papers want to say, this is a good union, it's promised never to strike anymore. Don't come to my union, because we'll never agree to that.
The main advocate of no-strike deals, the electricians' Eric Hammond, was barracked before he spoke. The miners said the electricians must toe the line or get out. First, Mr Hammond attacked the left.
There are plenty in our movement who hide behind the labels of left and Marxist, but do nothing to gain wide support, who pose impossible claims, and when they leave, it is to defeat. We are the future, and we're not going to go away.
There must be no further no-strike deals signed by any union, and if the unions don't like it, then as far as I'm concerned, this Trade Union Congress tells them they have no place in a united trade union movement.
But the decision on whether the electricians conform or risk expulsion is put off till next year. As Norman Willis told the conference, building for the future starts now. Special videos to spell out the new image were shown to delegates.
The decline of the industries where trade unionism has been long established, and the rise of those where the workforce has no collective voice. The shift from full-time to part-time work. Fewer men and more women at work. In other words, a shift away from areas of traditional trade union strength to those where we have far less representation.
New proposals include using the Trade Union Bank to issue discount union credit cards, financial services and advice. For the first time, there was a glossy guide for delegates, and you couldn't escape the special red document cases bearing this year's special message. It's all part of the fight to stop the drop in membership blamed on the Conservative government and shed the movement's cart horse image. Michael Green, News at 10, Blackpool.
This TV factory in Plymouth is where the Electricians' Union signed the first of its controversial no-strike agreements nearly 7 years ago. Since then, Toshiba has produced more than 1 million colour TV sets and has not lost 1 minute through labour disputes. Reminders of the Japanese work ethic abound throughout the factory. And all the members of the company, from the managing director down, wear blue jackets and share the same canteen. Industrial relations are handled by a joint board of managers and workers.
I tell these people when they come into the factory that I can defend them against injustice, I can defend them against harassment, but we as stewards cannot defend them against themselves.
In the event of a deadlock dispute, an independent arbitrator is brought in to decide for one side or the other.
We probably spend as much time communicating and discussing as a traditional management will spend in confrontation. The difference is that ours is the positive side and theirs is the negative side.
So it's adaptation on both sides, both the management and the union?
Very much. I think the unions, people talk about this being sweetheart agreements where they've given up the keys to the kingdom. That's absolutely untrue.
Everybody knows where they are from day one. So tell Mr. Scargill, if he dares to alter my agreement, the agreement in this factory in any way, or tries to influence it, invite me to the TUC and I will stand on the rostrum and answer his stupid challenge.
Toshiba have been so pleased with productivity at this plant, they've opened up another factory and now employ more than 1,200 people. David Chater, News at 10 in Plymouth.
Mrs. Thatcher will start soon on a tour of the inner cities, a priority she's set for her third term. Many of the old slums, like the Gorbals, have gone and been replaced by new surroundings and by new slums, a report in Part 2. Also, the coroner at the Zeebrugge ferry inquest says a verdict of manslaughter is possible, and Notts win the NatWest Trophy in a thrilling finish. That's in a couple of minutes.
When you've splashed out on something that looks just right on the surface, everything must feel just right underneath. At Tredair, we couldn't agree more. That's why we call Tredair luxury underwear for carpets. Singapore girl. The sky is yours alone. Singapore girl, you're a great way to fly.
Can you tell me what time you're open to? Terrific. I'll be round in half an hour.
Hello, love. Did you catch anything?
Just the one.
Good old Yellow Pages. It's not just there for the nasty things in life. It's there for the nice things, too.
Step this way for Star Bingo Arcade. The Star prizes on parade, but the others in
Win 20,000 a week, win thousands more. Start playing now.
In Chicago, they'll be killing more than time if they don't get their contract. While in the Arctic, you can risk all sorts of things waiting for delivery. And in Milan, Why face the music because the aria's late? That's better. Why hang about? DHL deliver overnight to more countries than you can shake a stick at. In fact, DHL deliver all over the world. What on earth are you waiting for?
Mrs. Thatcher is about to begin a tour of Britain's inner cities, the issues she's put at the top of her government's agenda. On election night, she pledged that their problems would be tackled. ITN has a series of special reports on the inner cities, the first from Glasgow.
When today's adults were children in Glasgow, the tenement slums in the city centre were a national disgrace, considered to be the worst in Europe. They were ghettos of poverty and deprivation. But at last they were condemned as unfit to live in, and notorious places like the Gorbals in the East End were cleared. Around them, the industrial heart of the city also collapsed. But today, the council has shored up what remains of the Victorian tenements to be refurbished as part of what's extravagantly called Europe's most ambitious regeneration scheme. They're no longer monuments to Glasgow's past, rather symbols of renewed hope. To make it all possible, Glasgow's Labour Council, Western Europe's biggest municipal landlord owning 56% of the city's housing stock, has had to work hand in hand with the Scottish Development Agency, an offshoot of central government. 13,000 new homes have already been built. Dura and Martha Barclay were born in the tenements here. Now they've returned to move into their first rented house. All mod cons, 4 bedrooms upstairs and a garden outside.
Did you ever think you'd be back picking the roses like this?
No, never, never. Wish we'd have had this long ago when we did get married.
No, I didn't think we'd ever have a garden. We're always hoping for a back and front door, but never thought we'd have a garden, you know.
Overlooking the newfound prosperity are the 1960s tower blocks, which are home to a quarter of the city's population, ever since the people were decanted from the inner city slums. Now these are Glasgow's new slums. An open window looks out on the city centre's multi-million pounds development schemes. It's open in a vain attempt to rid the room of mould and damp. The council says it would cost £3 billion to repair all the flats, money they don't have.
I think that Mrs. Thatcher, from one housewife to another, she should be opening her purse strings a wee bit and giving the council up here the money that they require to do the job properly. And the council, for their part, should be actually listening to what people are saying is the best way to repair blocks of flats like these. And if they can't repair them, then they should demolish them.
One of the biggest estates is Easterhouse. It's called a township, but it has none of the benefits of a town, even though its population of 50,000 is the size of Perth. Just a tiny shopping area and not much else. It's overcrowded and isolated from the mainstream of society, with 80% unemployment in some streets. The only place that keeps the youngsters off the streets is 2 Nissen huts called the Easterhouse Project. Before it was built 20 years ago, 4 teenage gangs terrorized the neighborhood. But in an amnesty organized by the singer Frankie Vaughan, they were persuaded to hand in their weapons.
They're going to get themselves a committee, they tell me. They're going to organize their own functions to raise funds for the type of center they want. And I'll help them. As long as they keep faith with me, I'll keep faith with them.
He's done just that, and the gang leaders joined him to find out what, if anything, has changed in 20 years.
Its success is that at least 500 young people pass through the doors every week, and they have done for 20 years. That's a lot of young people getting pretty sound, solid advice.
They can learn through our mistakes. You know, we realise we did make some duties, you know, we did make some foolish mistakes.
You're unemployed now and you still live on Easterhouse. Is life any better for you now than it was then?
No. It's a struggle. Just one struggle from 1 week to the next week.
Nowadays, the highlight of the week for the youngsters is the Friday night disco. But when the music stops, they know, just like their parents did, that they've been left out in the cold in Glasgow's forgotten housing estates. Keith Hatfield, News at 10, Glasgow.
It's become clear tonight that criminal prosecutions could follow the inquest into the Zeebrugge ferry disaster, which began today. A spokesman for the coroner said papers would be sent to the Director of Public Prosecutions if the jury returned verdicts of unlawful killing.
Chancellor Kohl of West Germany spoke out against the Berlin Wall tonight at a banquet for President Honecker of East Germany, the man who built it 26 years ago.
For all the bashing of drums, the moment the leaders of the two Germanies finally met was without much ceremony. Granted, one old man who could remember a time when there was only one Germany was animatedly awaiting it, but the flying together of East and West German flags as never before signalled the mood here that the East German visit was not before time. Thus, the old roofer from Saarland, Erich Honecker, became the first East German head of state ever to set foot in West Germany. It took the Frankfurter Allgemeine to remind its readers that this was the same Erich Honecker who built the Berlin Wall, that for 2.5 decades has come to symbolize the division between East and West. Yet today, here was Bonn laying out the motorcycle escort for a man so recently a hate figure here. The West Germans described him first as party leader and only secondly as head of state. Greeted by Chancellor Kohl, Bonn refuses to call this a state visit, regarding it as a strictly inter-German event. Even the national anthems were described simply as anthems. There will be no dramatic agreements, but the already booming trade between them will grow, and 1 million East Germans under 60 will visit here this year 20 times more than ever before. Having toasted each other at lunch and having left their ideologically opposing cabinets to mingle on the terrace, the two German heads of state walked in the garden. Later, Mr. Honecker, who hates helicopters, was prevailed upon to travel in one, the new détente perhaps extending to a newfound confidence in the other Germans' ability to fly. Tonight, however, the first protests, a small vocal group of relatives of political prisoners in East Germany. Honecker has said they will now be freed, but Kohl has also raised the issue. The dinner here tonight is the climax of a day which only 5 years ago would have caused widespread protest here. 3 years ago, the Russians stopped it altogether. But tonight, Erich Honecker's presence here now seems to symbolize the new rapprochement between both the superpowers and their respective allied Germanies. John Snow, News at 10, Bonn.
Cricket, Nottinghamshire have won the NatWest Trophy at Lord's after starting the day with little hope against Northamptonshire. They won by 3 wickets with only 3 balls to spare.
After Saturday's rain-shortened day, only a tiny crowd had come to see if Nott's 2 retiring overseas veterans, Rice and Hadley, could do the impossible. But when Rice was out, caught by his opposing captain Cook, Nott still had to score at a daunting 10 and over. French wasn't overawed. If Notts weren't to win, at least they'd go down with guns blazing. By now, Hadley was firing on all the cylinders of one of the world's great all-rounders, though at times he rode his luck. As Cook tried to encourage poor Capel for the last crucial over, 8 was still required. First ball saw a dramatic and entirely fluky run-out, a firm drive off Hadley's pads, and French could hardly believe it. But if the tension was getting to Hadley, he didn't show it. Next ball, a huge 6, straight out of the ground. Now only 2 required off 4 balls, but he only needed 1. One of the great one-day wins as a fitting climax to the New Zealanders' last match at Lord's.
The turning point really was Bruce French, very quick 30, helped me out a bit, but the big 6 there in the last over, I think I knew then that the game was ours with 4 balls to go and a couple of runs needed. It was really good effort.
Notts now look towards the treble of Championship and Sunday League to add to one of the most remarkable NatWest Cup wins of all time. Giles Smith, ITN Sport, Lord's.
The England spinner Phil Edmonds has been fined £500 by the Test and County Cricket Board for bringing the game into disrepute. Edmonds, who turned up at Lord's in his Rolls-Royce, was found guilty of making derogatory statements after writing 2 newspaper articles criticising the England captain Mike Gatting.
Finally, some news just in. Belgian police say they've stormed a prison where rioting was taking place tonight. The authorities say the riot is over, no hostages have been taken, and no prisoners have escaped.
And that's the news from us tonight. Good night.
There's an hour of comedy Wednesday night on ITV, beginning at 8 with Bruce Forsyth in Slingers Day.
Drunk again last night? So was I.
At 8:30, Richard Griffiths and Benjamin Whitrow effervesce in Fizz.
You're not unloading that lorry on your own, are you?
Well, you just take it easy now.
Yeah, just one crate at a time. All right.
Then, in a change of mood at 9...
I've faced gunmen and maniacs, but dentists still scare the hell out of me.
Open wide now.
Taggart is not the only victim, as you can see Wednesday on ITV.
Our next programme is definitely not for the faint-hearted. It's the true story of Dr. Frankenstein. But first, the weather prospects. Most places will stay dry tonight, though showers will continue for a time along the coast. With clear periods in the night, the temperature may fall as low as 8 degrees centigrade, 46 degrees Fahrenheit in sheltered inland places, though a few degrees higher nearer the coast. Tomorrow will have good sunny periods, but still with isolated showers, especially along the coast. Temperatures should rise to around 18 degrees centigrade, 64 degrees Fahrenheit inland, and the wind will be light or moderate, west to southwesterly.
Tomorrow's a big day at the Trades Union Congress in Blackpool, where they'll be discussing the government's fresh plans to curb union power. A full report on that from Jim Hancock. And there'll be the latest update on Storms and Sun American style from our guest US weatherman Ed Green. That's Granada Reports at 6.